Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to talk about parts 3, 4, and 5 of the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent. This month we're doing a little bit of change, mainly because I'm not on travel reviewing the Crisis crossover. We're back here in the man cave talking about it. So I didn't get around to talking about episode 3 of the Crisis crossover, so I figured we'll just throw it in here and kind of just talk about the crossover as a whole, but more so on the back 3 episodes and not the not just 1 or 2 or each individual one. We'll kind of lump it all together since it's over, and we can kind of talk about it now that it's over. So, all in all, I thought this crossover had some great moments, a lot of great fan service, and it was a little long. I feel like they could have shortened this up. I felt like episode 2 and episode 4 were the weakest of the bunch after viewing all of them, and I thought 1, 3, and 5 were obviously the best. So, let's talk about episode 3. This is the one where everything went down and we were on the Legend ship and the Earths were destroyed and it looked like everything was lost except our Paragons ended up in the vanishing point. Now, that's at the very end of the show. And we had some great moments with Superman, and we had, I can't even remember. I really felt that episode was really strong. But where it ended up was a little weird because we hadn't really seen the vanishing point, which is from the Legends of Tomorrow show. So if you don't watch that show, you're not going to know where the vanishing point is or that it's outside of time and space. So that was probably a little weird for people like Jim, who didn't watch Legends of Tomorrow at all, ever, and don't know what that place is or where it exists and stuff. They kind of mentioned it, but if you don't watch the Legends show or didn't watch season 1 or 2, you're probably like, wow, this came out of nowhere, out of the left field. Why does this place even exist? So I can understand that criticism, but these are really made for people who pay attention and watch all of the shows all together. One other really strong thing I did like about episode 3 was the Flash scenes. You had Black Lightning coming in. I thought that was really strong. And, Flash talking to the older Flash, which was, the actor who played his dad in the Flash series, as well as that actor also played the original Flash in the 90s, which is why he was wearing the 90s costume. So, that, I can't remember the guy's name, I'm sorry, but that actor, when they originally cast him as the dad, it was like a stunt casting a little bit, but he's a good actor. We'd seen him on Dawson's Creek as Dawson's dad for a long time, so I was like, yeah, cool, that's a great idea. A little bit of throwbacks, and then they introduced his wife as another character on the Flash show, and they were sprinkling little hints. Then when they kind of killed off his dad or sent his dad away when they figured out the murder part after season 1 or 2, with his dad being in prison, then they brought that actor, John Wesley Shipp, his name popped in my mind just now, they brought him back as the Flash from Earth 2, Jay Garrick, and then eventually they brought him back as the Flash from whatever Earth that was in the Flash or CW universe. But the 90s Flash, they acknowledged that it exists. And that was a really cool thing when we saw it. I think it was for was it last year with the Elseworlds crossover maybe? Was the first time we saw him in his old 90s costume. I really like that. And I don't know where they got that costume. It looked like they made it out of the same material. I'm sure it wasn't the exact one that he wore 30 years ago. But, it looked just like it does on the television show from the 90s, of which I've only seen 2 episodes maybe. There's only 12. It only lasted 1 season, but you can go and check that out. I thought that was really strong. Anytime John Wesley Shipp is on screen, I really like those moments in The Flash. He's a really strong actor, and I'm sad to see him go. It looks like his participation in the Flash TV series is now over and done with. Now that they've killed off his dad, they've killed off his Earth 2 Jay Garrick character, and they've killed off, his 90s Flash character. So I don't think there's any more Flashes he can portray without really stretching it out to make it really thin. But I really did like that idea. It still held true with the Crisis on Infinite Earths thing, where I'm disappearing because I'm looking for my trade. Here we go. Found it. Held true to this moment in this book where the Flash dies. Now, originally in the books, spoiler, I mean, it's 35 years old really at this point, 1986 is when it came out, but you had Barry Allen die in the books, and that's what they had been forecasting since Flash, like episode 1, season 1. So to turn that around and make it a different Flash, I thought was really cool, and a nice way to keep the series going. Other people may have been, they chickened out or whatever, but I mean, come on, you got Grant Gustin signed on. Nobody's going to be able to carry the show in his wake. He's your guy. He's your main guy. So there's no way they're going to kill him off. So that to me made sense, and I really liked the moment. And John Wesley Shipp sold it. So thumbs up to him. So that was kind of like the best parts of episode 3. The whole stuff with the Paragons, was like really kind of down on. I don't remember if they were in the book. I haven't read this in a number of years. If they had all these different people. But I know they did gather certain heroes for certain powers to fight the Anti-Monitor in time. But there's a lot of differences, just mainly because who they have and who they have access to. And, when you have, when you're writing comic books, you can pull anybody. You can have them do whatever you want. And you can pull Superman, you can pull Batman, you can pull 3 versions of Superman. Whereas in, like, the CW world, you only have access to anybody but Superman, except we had 2, I guess, but they're not our Superman. We're not following them around, whereas, like, Superman here is kind of a side character, and then he comes back in the end, and then you get Earth 2 Superman and Superboy Prime and, like, a whole bunch of them. So there's, like, a whole bunch to do with Superman. Also, Supergirl also dies in this Crisis. There's a famous cover. If I can find it. Here we go. This is Crisis, I think 6 or 7. This is the cover to Crisis there. Superman holding Supergirl's dead body. We kind of had the alternate of that at the end of episode 3, which was also a great moment where you have, I think that was that Earth's, the alternate Superman, Brandon Routh in the Superman suit, and Supergirl was like kind of holding him when they teleported to the vanishing point, and then he disappeared thanks to Lex Luthor. So that was like a callback to this moment right here on the cover, and then it happened later on in that issue. So that's what that is all about. So there are certain callbacks and stuff that I really appreciated, but on its own, this whole crossover is kind of like its own story. They picked some of the things that they could, and then tried to fit everything around it. After all, this was 5 episodes of television. This is 12 dense issues of comic books. It's written by Marv Wolfman. We'll get to him in a moment. And it's drawn by the perfect, great legend, George Perez. And he does a great job. So obviously, you get moments like this. Look at this Anti-Monitor right here. Love that. Obviously, you can't capture everything in here into 5 episodes of television, especially when your characters are limited, all that stuff. If they ever do like an animated adaptation of this, I think it will be closer to the source material, but that's not my complaint about this series. I think it was a little long. So episode 4 is where we started back up here in January. This was the Arrow episode, and at the end of episode 3, we had decided for some reason to make Oliver the Spectre. And you had Jim Corrigan appear on the island and, flash his green eyes at him, and then Oliver flashed his green eyes, and that was supposed to mean something. Now, to layman viewers who are only watching the CW shows, again, my buddy Jim, I'm talking directly to you, you didn't really know what the Spectre was, and they never really explained it. They just called him, I am something else, which is true, but it's also a really lame explanation of the Spectre. I'm looking down because I'm searching for a specific page in this book. Spectre does play a role in Crisis, but it's kind of a small one because he gathers all the magic users in the DC universe, and they form a ring around, I forget what it was, like the beginning of time or the end of time and stuff like that, and they try to stop the Anti-Monitor, and they fail, I believe. Or it's not clear if they fail or not. Again, I need to reread this really bad. But anyway, you have these moments with the Spectre here in the corner. You have all the people gathered around him. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's probably a terrible image. Again, right here. This is how dense this book was. Is like this in today's comic books would be a 2-page spread. It would go all the way across the book here. But this is just one panel in this one page. And they would pad this out and spread this out nowadays. Here's a good look right here. The Spectre. So the Spectre is kind of like, he is the embodiment of God's vengeance, actually, in the DC universe. He's like a spirit, and he inhabits a human being, and the human being is aware of the spirit, and they kind of talk to each other, but not in a, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm great kind of thing. It's more of like, I hear him in my head, the Spectre is angry, or if you're talking to the Spectre when he's in his green cloak form, you're like, bring me Oliver. I want to talk to Oliver. I don't want to talk to you. Or Ollie, are you hearing me? They always address him as the person they know him as. So Jim Corrigan was like the original Spectre. Then, in the comics anyway, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, became the Spectre. And then he went back to being Jim Corrigan, and I don't know who he is in the comics right now. He was never Oliver Queen, though. Never Oliver Queen. The only time I think they did have Oliver Queen talking with the Spectre was in Kevin Smith's Quiver run. And that's when he was talking to Hal Jordan, and Hal was kind of doing his otherworldly thing. That's what was going on at that time. But never Oliver Queen. Oliver Queen being the Spectre is something created entirely for the TV show. And I understand what they were trying to do. Like, they wanted to kill him off in episode 1, and then they wanted to have him have, you can't kill your character of the show and then have the finale after the crossover in which he is killed. Because what are you going to do for that episode? So they make him the Spectre. We get this whole episode 4 of the crossover here in the Arrow episode where he's like revisiting moments from his past and interacting with other people. We get a flashback to last year's crossover with Elseworlds. We get a flashback to the Invasion crossover. We get flashbacks to other moments in Arrow's life when Brandon Routh or Ray Palmer comes into the picture. So it's just kind of like a placement. Let's journey along the 8 seasons of Arrow kind of thing. That's kind of what that was. Similar to like the 100th episode they had, I think last year, or 2 years ago, whenever that was, 125th. The anniversary episodes, they always do some sort of like clip show, and that's kind of what this was. And it's fine for an episode of Arrow, but it was not fine for an episode of Crisis on Infinite Earths. No. It was just slow and plotting and didn't move anything forward. And yeah, we had the origin of the Anti-Monitor in that episode and Monitor and all that. That was cool. I was interested to see more of that, actually, than the Arrow stuff. So once they got to the final battle, and it was just kind of like, I don't know, I got bored a little bit because you realize that these guys are fighting nothing. And they just put all these guys out there, and they're paying them a bunch of money, and they say, okay, swing away, shoot away, throw away. If you're Batwoman, throw your batarangs. They're like, wherever you want, we'll fill it in later. And it was clear watching that watching that episode, that's exactly what's happening. And they've done it before with like the Invasion crossover when the aliens came down, the White Martians or the Dominators. It's clear when they're doing that, and it sucks, and usually they keep it kind of quick, but here you had all these heroes, you had these big wide shots, but it just reeked of like, okay, they're just swinging away into nothing. Nothing's landing, nothing's hitting, which is why I think the Elseworlds crossover was really good, because there wasn't a whole bunch of like CG mumbo-jumbo. They were fighting each other or fighting a certain person. The Crisis on Earth X crossover was really good because they were fighting the Nazis and stuff, so you had actors in costume that they, two stunt guys could interact with each other. That was a lot more interesting to watch than the CGI, and real people swinging at nothing, connecting with nothing, and therefore everything's really fast. So that kind of fell flat for me. So then Oliver's showdown with the Anti-Monitor was also weird because it's just like, the Anti-Monitor obviously showed up out of nowhere, which was, he'd shown up in like a vision one of the episodes before, but all of a sudden here's the big bad we've been talking about, and it wasn't anything threatening to him at all. Like Mar-Novu, the Monitor, had been more threatening, being mysterious, than the Anti-Monitor was. Now, That's also kind of true of the comic book. Like, they had placed the Monitor in other issues in the year leading up to this, and then he introduces himself, but you start facing off against the Anti-Monitor, or you see him, I guess, I don't know, is it fairly quickly? I don't think it's that quick. It's probably about halfway through. Most of the time you're looking at the Anti-Monitor wave, so maybe I'm wrong. But the Anti-Monitor is actually a lot more, like, weird looking. He's not just some wrinkly faced white guy with white skin. Rewind the video and go back to that splash I found where he's more like skeletal looking. But yeah, that final battle just fell flat, and to have Oliver as the Spectre fight him, which is a callback to the book, so I appreciate that, but it was clearly like, this is the star, our pillar upon which we stand on. This is Arrow, this is Oliver Queen, so we're going to give him this big heroic moment again as a send-off, and you're never going to see him again. And it was like, that was his contractual obligation fulfilled kind of thing. So, I don't know, I liked it. It fell flat a little bit. I did like the moments at the end where Kara and Flash raced up there and talked to him as he was like going. And then it going to black and the infinitude and stuff I thought was cool. I knew where it was going, having read the book. So I was not surprised there. But I think I may have told my buddy Jim that, this is probably going to happen after this episode. Which I'm so glad they spent an entire episode devoted to what happened. So, you have the multiverse at the beginning of this crossover, right? Same thing in this. Now, in the comic books, the multiverse, they felt that it was getting a little too confusing for the readers. So you spent a bunch of time taking the multiverse out in this book, and that's what most of this crossover is. We did that in like episode 1 and 2 of the crossover. So what really happened was they destroyed the universe at the end of episode 3 and the multiverse, not just ours, but everything out there, and that's really what we spent episode 4 in this Speed Force vanishing point nonsense going on. And then went to the antimatter universe, to this quarry somewhere in Vancouver where you could see the pine trees in the back. It's just like, just angle it down a little bit so we actually believe you're on an isolated desert planet, but whatever, limitations, I guess. So, at the end of that, since there is nothing, you have Oliver creating something, and then to have the Paragons be like, oh, we're injecting hope and courage and faith and love, and okay, whatever, fine. That made sense in terms of like CW cheese, I guess. And so what happened was Oliver, I guess, created one world, one universe, and brought all of his friends together, I guess is what they're trying to go after, so that they wouldn't be alone or lonely after he had left, or he would make some mark on this world in a way that he couldn't as the Green Arrow, and that was to bring like Superman and Supergirl over, bring Black Lightning over, so now you have all these heroes he's aware of as a Spectre, I guess, on one world to combat what he would have helped them combat if he were still around. So that's cool, and it makes all the crossover and multiverse stuff a lot easier from here on out, because technically you still have the multiverse out there, as we saw in the last episode 5, but, all the crossovers now are going to be on the CW Earth. Like, there's no CW universe anymore. Now we've established at the end of episode 5 that it's all the multiverse. Everything DC's the multiverse. Man of Steel exists in this world because we had the Flashes show up in episode 4. We'll get to that in a moment. We had Birds of Prey, we saw the Titans show, we saw Swamp Thing, we saw, what was the other thing? Doom Patrol. All those things take place on their own Earth now, apparently. So they all exist. We saw Stargirl apparently has her own Earth, and that's a show coming in the spring from DC Universe and CW. We saw, what else did we see? We saw a whole bunch. The only thing we didn't see were the cartoon Earths. And I think that would have been bit more fun if we'd seen like the Bruce Timm Justice League Earth or the Teen Titans Go Earth. That would have been a little more fun. But, this was pretty good. Pretty good. So, very interesting. to basically acknowledge everything. And they did that, I guess they were forecasting that in episode 4 when they brought in Ezra Miller from the Justice League movie to do this weird scene that meant nothing. Really, like, he goes into the Speed Force, sees another version of himself, that guy disappears, there's really no rhyme or reason for it, and it was clear in the episode, but after the fact I read today that apparently Warner Brothers Movies called and asked Mark Guggenheim for that, who is like the executive producer of the crossover, to bring Ezra Miller in, that they want him to be in. So instead of just providing a clip for one of these multiverse things, they brought him and Grant together to shoot this scene that was just really weird and out of place. And they posted these pictures on Twitter, like, right after that episode aired, and to show that, like, oh no, they were in the same room with each other, but for some reason the focal length of the lens when they were doing their shots was like, it made them look like they were standing up against green screen. It was like, why would you do that? And they only had 2 shots of them, like, talking to each other as the Flash, like side shots, Why wasn't the whole thing shot over the shoulder or something like that? It was just, it made it feel really weird and like crammed in there more than it would have if they had shot it differently, I guess. Or maybe they rewrote it after they shot them together and then shot those other 2 things separately. Who knows? But it wasn't that good. I mean, I'm fine with them bringing it in. That was kind of exciting. Would have been more exciting if you had Batman come in or Superman come in from the movies, because those are established stars. Ezra Miller's not. He's trying to stay that way, or trying to become established, trying to keep his Flash movie alive. Him throwing a reference to Vic, to Cyborg, I think was a little bit fun, but this is an actor, I think, who's trying to keep his flame going when his movie keeps getting delayed, and he's afraid it's not going to happen anymore. So it's like a cry for help. It's just kind of like, I don't know. But overall, I liked episode 5 with all the goodbyes to Oliver. Felt really meaningful. It was weird that it was like a Legends of Tomorrow episode, and those guys got sidelined on their own episode, but whatever, it's the Legends. But I did like the stuff with Rory Heatwave writing a book. That's been a thing in the Legends last season. He ghost wrote this as this like woman's romance author, and then he exposed himself like, I'm actually so-and-so, and not the other person he'd hired to be her at this book signing con thing. It was kind of funny. So that it was clear that the tone changed, and it was like, this is definitely a Legends episode because it's a little wacky, it's a little wonky, and I'm sure it threw people off who don't normally watch Legends. That's why I love Legends, because it is weird, it is wacky. When Bebo showed up, I'm sure my buddy Jim was like, what the hell is going on? Why is there a giant fluffy bear walking down the street, and why are they talking about him like he's a threat? Well, they spent all of 2 seasons ago building that guy up. I mean, not that guy. He was like a little doll, and then at the end of him, they blew him up like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and then controlled him to fight a time demon. They kind of explained it in the episode, but you have to see it to believe it. It was fun for me, who's watched Legends, but it's probably not fun for anyone else who didn't watch Legends at all. Again, like The Vanishing Point, and then had this thrown in their face, like, oh, you should have been paying attention. And they maybe felt like they were punished for it, and it just kind of, I appreciate it, it's fine, but it probably made the crossover feel a little more off if you don't watch everything. And, that can kind of be off-kilter, and this 5 episodes is a commitment, to sit down and watch it all, because it really pays off if you watch it all. But if you only watch 1 or 2 shows, I don't know that it pays off as much. But I think the ending was near perfect, though, with the Hall of Justice, the table and the chairs and the empty chair for Oliver. Like, that's straight out of Grant Morrison's like Justice League run, and I don't know if it was been in the 60s or whatever before, but them having a table with chairs with their insignias on the back, that's totally like JLA Grant Morrison from the 90s, and I love that series. So I really, really like that touch. Really, really like that. And, that Hall of Justice is from the Super Friends cartoon. And then the very, very end, which kind of put a sour note on the whole episode, was this crate with Gleek on it, who's the monkey from the Super Friends. Also, he's like the Wonder Twins' pet monkey. So I hope they don't introduce those guys into the CW universe. I hope it's just a throwaway thing that we'll never see this stupid monkey again. because honestly, that would be terrible. I feel like they're fun in the cartoon in the 70s and 80s, but I don't think they would be fun now. So I would just keep them out of it. But overall, I think this was an ambitious thing, and for them to do everything they did in episode 1 and episode 2 and episode 3, I was pretty proud of them for going as far as they did. And then to have 4 meh. Episode 5, was really fun. The battle with the Anti-Monitor, I feel like, was better than the battle with him in 4. The everybody against the Anti-Monitor was a lot more fun to watch than everybody against the space demons or whatever the hell those things are called. So yeah, I mean, overall, I feel like I probably enjoyed the Invasion or the Crisis on Earth X crossovers a little bit better than this one, but this one stands up for being ambitious. So I'd have to give it 3.5 stars out of 5 if I were to rate it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I know I've been rambling a long time here, but I'm just my off-the-cuff thoughts on the CW crossover Crisis on Infinite Earths. So please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below what you loved, what you hated, what you want more of, and if you want to see Gleek next year. Anyways, thanks you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.